Okay, so just a few rules for the chair discussion. Delegates, please wait for a microphone, and just make sure that you state your name and company before asking the question. So I'll just open it to the floor, really. Any questions for our panel, our presenters, for any aspect of their presentation? Sue?
Sarah Manelman Young. I'd really like to ask how far you think you're going to really push your requirements in terms of SuDS design and your aspiration to keep water on the surface. Because I received a plan only yesterday for a site in Wales that showed a swale and a pond around the back, and clearly everything else was going to be in a pipe from the front. So I'd love to hear how you're going to deal with this.
I think they'll just have to follow the national standards, otherwise it'll be refused. I think we're going to take a hard stance. If they don't adhere, if they don't do the principles and follow each one of the standards, the application will be refused. So pre-app is key to this. I think they need to come and see us at the pre-app stage, and then we can guide them which way they need to go. But yeah, we will be taking a firm stance. Yeah. Anything to add?
Yeah. I think it is a considerable step change in how development is going to move forward. So, as Michelle said, the pre-application is key. There's going to be a lot of sort of hand-holding initially, and then hopefully in the coming months, with a firm sort of approach, we should start seeing the changes that we want going forward.
Clearly that's you in Caerphilly and the other two authorities you're dealing with. Is that a consistent view throughout all the other authorities in Wales? And are we going to see that consistency?
Well, it should be, because the national standards are the national standards, and to achieve compliance you need to meet those statutory requirements. We're lucky they are statutory requirements moving forward now.
There's a bit of a Mexican standoff at the moment. So we've had a few pre-apps, but with regards to the full, they still seem to be going in for planning. And then obviously the planners are saying you need SAB approval, and they're going, no, we'll do the planning first. But what they don't understand is they need to be doing their flow paths, green and blue corridors, and the drainage will dictate the layout, but they're doing it the other way around. So potentially they'll get planning, but then when they come to us, we'll be like, and then we'll have to go back in for planning. So they're just, it's going to cost them more money. So yeah, it's exciting times ahead.
Okay, any more questions from the floor? Yes, on the front.
Hi, Stuart McTaggart, HACOM. Another one for Michelle and Rhodri, and this is maybe a bit too far in the future for you guys to have really started thinking about it, but I noticed there's the expectation that the maintenance is done on the basis of you guys maintaining it. And first of all, is there a place where all those contributions are put and ring-fenced? And then is that something that you're going to have to, in 10 or 20 years' time, gear up again to have a framework or something to deliver that maintenance? Or is that something that your highways team might take on? Or
Yeah, very good question. But commuter sims have been known for years, so they do it as part of Highway Section 38. So there'll be a maintenance regime in for that 60 years, and we'll be drawing down on that money every year. So say perma paving needs to be, say, swept and vacuumed and regritted every 6 months. That would be accounted for in the commuter sim, and it'd just be drawn down. What we've done in Wales, we've done a common sense approach, because if you work out a commuted sum for perma paving, potentially it needs to be replaced 3 times, but that's a bit unrealistic. So Caerphilly's approach is we will replace it once, because it'll take the replacement cost down. Does that make any sense? So with commuter sums, you put maintenance in for 60 years, and then you put replacement cost in. But if you worked out the life of a block is about 25 years, nobody else will give you any more. But we've used a common sense approach, and then we just replace it at 50 years or 60 years. So there is a regime in place that's been there for years. So the developers are used to it. They're used to the formula, the methodology, the commuter sum formula. So no, we don't have to look at it in 20 years, because it'll just be in place for the 60 years, or if it was a structure, it'd be 120 years. Does that make any sense? It's already there. And Caerphilly is well geared up, because I work for highway operations, so we've got the DLO already under us. So we've got gangs in place ready to do this maintenance.
Bridget, you were going to ask a question.
I just wondered if you foresaw any particular challenges with requiring SuDS for just to say 2 properties and meeting the standard.
No, they still have to follow the standards. There's always room for rain gardens, rills and, water butts. But you still got to use the same principles. Yeah, what did you say?
Okay, any more questions from the floor? Just at the back.
Thanks. Graham Fairhurst, I chair the susdrain PSG. A couple of questions really, I suppose mainly for Caerphilly. One is the Con29 form, I presume, data generally, I presume you're keeping detailed records of SuDS that are adopted. So presumably you are dealing with the Con29 form, but also using your data to drive your maintenance regimes. So that's a sort of question. The other question is, are you pooling the commuted sums into a common sort of bank and drawing down that for all sites, or are you holding a rigid ring-fenced regime for each commuted sum for each site?
Okay, so if I go into the Con29s, yes, we've got an asset register where all assets, obviously all the historic ones have been plotted, and that was because of the Flood and Water Management Act. We had to do a register and a record, so that's already been done. All the SuDS features, historic ones have been plotted, but going forward, nothing's been adopted yet, but yes, it will be for the Consent 29 legal searches. We will be keeping an asset register of who owns it, if it's private, public, so yeah. And with regards the money, it'll be, at the moment, Caerphilly's approaches, it'll be ring fence for that site, so we can draw down and prove that we spent the money on the maintenance. It may change in the future, but that's a policy for Caerphilly, not me. At the moment, it'll be every site has been ring fenced, where we've had commuted sums for highways, parks. So yeah, does that answer your question? Yes. No, just get a museum in place, easy. Any advice, come and see Caerphilly.
I can see that we're all keen to hear from Caerphilly.
I know.
Can we just have a question at the front? Sorry, you had your hand up.
So it's Matt from ACOM. I'm going to go slightly different sort of theme now, looking for the sewage for adoption aids, and just sort of thinking about it was actually mentioned that features which are going to drain highway there wouldn't be any obligation for those to be adopted. But what about features which are going to be draining highway and water from, say, residential plots as well? Is there any sort of thoughts at the moment on how they might be dealt with in the process?
So if from a Wales perspective, if it was coming into a swale, the domestic, it would be adopted as part of the highway section 38. So you'd have domestic coming into the swale on the side. Because in England, obviously, that would be different. So you'd have to give a different perspective. But in Wales, we would allow domestic into that swale. What we're proposing to the developers is they put single connections in, because if you join 2 sort of swales up in the back gardens, there would be a committed sum for that. So what we're promoting is they put single connections into the swales, into the highway, and then we'd only be looking for the commuted sum then for the highway section. But again, that would be under a section 38, not the SAB. So from an alien's perspective, then...
It's pretty much the same sort of thing. If the domestic flow goes into that swale or feature first, or coincidental with the highway stuff, then that becomes effectively a sewer from that point onwards. It's only really where it's only highway going into that feature before the domestic stuff kicks in. I think that's...
Yeah, it's a different perspective in England, isn't it? Because we have the duty to adopt. So I would adopt it as the SAB, and if the highway authority doesn't adopt it and the road stays private, we would have to, as the SAB, adopt the drainage. Does that make sense? Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll come to Sue and then to yourself.
Yeah, Chris, I think I'm still quite disappointed with SF8 in terms of this issue of highways water, because I raised it in the steering group meeting that we have one part of the document where it says such consent shall not be unreasonably withheld with regards to highway water, and then we've got all these exclusions which are completely contradictory in the same document, and that means we might end up designing systems in inefficient ways to try and make sure that it happens in a prescribed sequence, because if I was looking at a road, then I'm going to be putting it along the road into a swale or a bioretention feature and then connecting straight into that from a house as well, which is the sensible, logical way to do it. But there's, I think, complete ambiguity as to whether that would or wouldn't be adopted, and it probably wouldn't. And then we had whole discussions about, well, then do we have 3 pipe systems going through, and we're back to where we started.
Yeah, I would hope to see that what SuDS for adoption does is take out some of that ambiguity in that the highways, if it's an adoptable highways, it's under a different agency, but it's still adoptable. SuDS for adoption is only applying to the sewer element of it, and the water company responsibilities. The water companies don't generally adopt roads. But the roads will be adopted by an agency that has suitable qualifications to make that adoption. So it's not the case that it won't be adopted. It just falls outside of SuDS for Adoption 8. Yes, the highway water is part of that. So the highway water will become part of that, the Section 38 type agreement, or Section 278 if that's how it works. But it will be adopted as a function of the road. It doesn't become a non-adopted feature. If it is serving an adopted road, it's part of that adoption. So those elements, the only sort of caveat on that is where there are private roads, which are quite rare and sort of isolated. But apart from that, if it's actively draining a road, it will have to be adopted as part of that adopted road until you get a domestic connection to it, and then it can be adopted by the water company. So those 2 distinctions are still there.
Yeah.
Andy Wade from Barrett Homes. I was going to pick up a very similar point you just made. The one fundamental point in that same conversation is relying on a highway authority adopting SuDS components. So I've got a site at the moment that's just discussion with the local authority, with the LFFA promoting a treatment stage within the highway runoff, and the highway authority of the same local authority not wanting to take things like permeable paving, filter strips and swales as features within the 38. So you still will have exactly that same conversation, that you will have highway water that has to go into a gully and a surface water traditional system with domestic flows or other flows going into what could be a true SuDS scheme. So I appreciate Wales is in a different position, and they're obviously much more active in this, but certainly large parts of England as highway authorities aren't.
I would fully agree with that. Yes, there are a lot of highway authorities that are still sort of in that catch-up, and it is frustrating when they're in the same authority that has just given you this whole sort of planning process where they wanted this nice SuDS feature which everybody's going along with, and it all seems to make sense. SuDS for Adoption comes along and helps you with some elements of it, and then frustratingly you've got some gaps, and an engineer in the highway department has decided he doesn't want a swale next to his road because he thinks it'll get the subbase wet. I've certainly had that. It's partly why I wanted to promote the SuDS for Adoption out there, because of the gaps that are there, that it's not necessarily addressing everything, and it should be aware that there are these gaps which still need to be sort of bridged in some way. It goes a long way to help, but the highways element of it is still something that's going to prove difficult for us.
From a Wales perspective, there's been some resistance from the highway development and then certain local authorities, but with the SAB enactment, it takes out all of this now, because they have to accept it. But there are the commuted sums then to cover that if it's extra over, normal construction, as we say. in Wales, gullies are gone. Gullies are gone. It's swales at the side of the road. Sustainable all the way.
Great stuff. Sorry, Steve, did you have a question?
Hi, it's a question for Chris again. In the past, we've had a lot of trouble with designing SuDS with permeable pavements in private areas, or even in parking areas, to be honest, where the water company won't actually accept them as part of the storage requirements. So we end up putting permeable pavements in, but we don't actually make the benefit of them, and we're double designing the rest of the system downstream. So do you think it will help with that?
I would hope it would highlight that, because I've certainly had that issue myself, where certainly on the issue of land drainage, I've had permeable paving sort of refused to be an element of the adopted system because there's a perception that it could end up functioning as a land drain, which obviously means that your permeable paving is not working, because if it's actively taking groundwater out of the system and putting it into a sewer, then it's not permeable paving. I think there is an element of education and a learning curve that the water companies are going to have to comply with, and different water companies have got different views on all this. Some are more sort of in tune with it than others. I think that is another one of these elements that we've got to watch, and we've got to keep pushing, because the whole system, it's a similar thing with green roofs. Green roofs have an attenuation value, but if the water company or any other approving body is basically going to say you can't rely on the upstream private attenuation, then your whole SuD strategy could fall over and you end up duplicating everything. There are elements in SuDS for Adoption 8, there is a part in there which we did have some debate about, because on the terminology it was to do with how you calculate impermeable area, and the first draft of it suggested that you did exclude things like permeable paving and green roofs, but I think the general consensus was that isn't the right way to go, because if you write it down in SuDS for Adoption that you should include your entire development as impermeable, then there's no encouragement for soft features. So the wording has been changed to try and reflect that they will have a benefit on the system. I think it's unfortunately a sort of suck it and see what happens when it comes forward. I don't know if Andy's got a view on that.
Well, unfortunately, last time I was involved in SuDS for Adoption, it was probably Section 18 and 17 of the Public Health Act. So I've only recently been invited for a workshop internally, so at this moment in time, I can't really comment on that until I'm fed back.
Thank you.
Okay. No worries. Any more questions from the floor? Yes, just at the back, and then we'll come to Graham. Just over there.
Sorry. Pete Tamlin from Marshalls. A question for Caerphilly, really from the Welsh perspective. How have you done it so quickly?
Well, setting it up, it's taken us a year. Literally a year. You know, started off with, is that what you meant?
That's quick.
Is it? No, it was just very organised. With all of this coming, I think some local authorities in Wales didn't think it was going to happen, but we started the ball rolling last January, you know, doing my scrutiny and cabinet reports, doing business cases for staff, buying the software. We bought the software before Welsh Government had given us 20 grand funding, but we bought the software before that. You know, we knew it was going to come. We've set up, like you said, online payment systems, the website, you know, the awareness. You know, very good team working around me. Roger's excellent. You know, I know my staff below me. We've all worked together. It's been stressful, been like roller coaster. And the moment you think you've sorted something, and then something else, you hit a brick wall. But we've done it. It's working at the moment. It's obviously very early. We're very green. Excuse the pun. But see how it goes. There's a review in 12 months, in 2 years anyway. So
we've been quite lucky as well. Even before the Minister signed the commencement order, we were actively working on promoting some of our policies and procedures internally. So Caerphilly has always had a sort of internal promotion for sustainable drainage, and that's probably carried us forward, maybe more so than most.
and our planners have been on board as well, which is great. So I think you know, all the internal departments, you have to work together. Like you said, your highway development, your countryside the parks department, all of us have worked together. We've met. We set up a steering group as well, where we met regularly and especially our document that we're producing at the moment. You know, we had a steering group set up for that, for producing it with all the departments. Because we don't want to step on their toes either. But like you said, it is early days, but it's going okay at the moment.
Graham.
Thanks. Probably a question for Chris, really. The water companies, under the assuming the adoption standards go through and are accepted, will the water companies be adopting swales that take a mixture of domestic and highway drainage, or are you still unenthused about taking highway drainage into a common system?
No, I think under SuDS Option 8 it's fully acceptable that a swale, as described earlier, that had domestic flow into it as well as highway drainage would be an adoptable feature. It will become a sewer. It'll be a surface feature sewer, but it will become a sewer.
So I have a supplementary, and if I may then. So if I'm a developer working in Wales, could I go to one of the Welsh water companies, Severn Trent or Welsh Water, and seek my adoption with them, or could I go to the local authority? Have I got a choice?
No. We've got the duty to adopt, so Welsh Water out the loop. And Severn Trent. Yeah. No, we've got the duty to adopt. It's mandatory. So there's no option to go to Welsh Water.
I like clarity.
Yeah. It's a no from me. I feel like Simon Cowell here. It's a no from me.
I have a supplementary question for Chris, actually. Is there a tipping point between the sort of mixture of highways and residential sort of discharge, if you like? If it's one house on a massive highway, for example?
Well, no.
It'd be two houses,
yeah. In effect, it would be two. It'd be two units. It won't be upstream of that point. There'll be one will be highway and one will be private. But downstream of that point, it's more than one entity, so it falls under the criteria. Yeah.
Yes, Steve. We've probably got time for one more question.
It's a question for Caerphilly again. My understanding of Floods and Water Management Act is that although you've got a statutory duty to adopt if a developer requests it, the developer doesn't have to come to you and ask for you to adopt it. Is that
That's wrong.
right?
We've got the duty to adopt through our legal agreement. You would have to forgive us, community, so you can't. You're not about management companies, you're not about going to management companies, or
Or a water company.
no.
Does it say in the legislation that I have to come to you to adopt it?
Yep. Well, we've got the duty. No, we've got the duty to adopt. So if it meets the ministerial standards, then we have a duty to adopt.
But if they don't offer it to you?
Well, in the legal agreement, it'll be in there.
Yeah, it's a bit. It's not entirely clear in the legislation. It's probably something that does need addressing, but we will secure the adoption via a bespoke legal agreement, so a SAB agreement, which will secure the adoption.
The legislation doesn't say that a housing developer has to come to you for the adoption.
No, it says, but it does say the SAB has the duty to adopt.
Yeah, but that's different. That means that if they come to you, you've got to adopt it, not that they have to come to you.
But we would secure the ability for them to come to us via the legal agreement.
Yeah, but they might not, what Graham was saying is they might want to go to a water company. They might not want to come to you.
Well, the option isn't there to go to the water company anymore, because it's the SAB's duty to adopt. It is quite black and white in that respect.
We have one more question. What time for one more question? So anything from the audience? No? Okay, I've got one question then. And I just want sort of short answers really. So what more can we do to inspire the next generation to understand, appreciate, value and deliver sustainable drainage systems? And I think I was sort of inspired to ask that question from the presentation that Andy gave around this concept of pester power.
I guess I probably already mentioned it on the presentation, so we want to deliver SuDS in every single school across the AW region to get to that younger generation, to really inspire them. Last year I went to the Norwich Science Festival, took the SuDS model out. It's amazing how the younger generation already gets it, and even the parents with them. So it's probably one of the hardest days I've spent non-stop. We had a SuDS model, maybe it was a little Lego characters, but the children really enjoyed it, but it was amazing to see they already understood it.
I'll take it from a different aspect. I think we're lucky in Wales. Every local authority is now gearing up for the Sustainable Drainage Approval Body, so we're going to see a new generation of engineers coming forward, and hopefully they will promote sustainable drainage.
I think we probably need to target a bit more on university courses and not just for courses like engineering and geography, which might typically take these subjects into account, but more, doing work with landscape architects and it's completely lost my mind, but architects just in general. I think we really need to broaden it out into having a look at who is involved in the planning application process and where those STEM subjects come from, and trying to get SuDS and sustainable drainage into those topics as well.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. You kind of mentioned there's a research programme looking at communities, communities and SuDS, and I think that's probably where the pester power sort of comes from, is to somehow get our message out there that we're putting these features in that are actually benefiting the community as such. I mean, an example, I actually stopped off at a site that we're doing in London where they've just put in a rain garden in the highway. And while I was just walking past, I actually heard people saying, well, that looks nice. That looks, it looks different from the complete tarmac area that it used to be. And it's things like that. But they were probably not aware that it's a drainage feature. It's more of a landscaping feature, but it's getting that message across, and I think all the others are good places to start.
Excellent. Can I just ask the panel to stay seated, and can we all show our appreciation to the speakers today? So I've got a job of summing up now, and I had a big, long thing that I'd written out, but I think we'll just keep it brief. I think there's some really positive things that we've heard today. I mean, Schedule 3 in Wales, it's clear that we're all very interested in how that's going to pan out just by the questions that have been asked to the panel. I'm really enthused by SuDS for Adoption 8 as well. It's not a panacea, but I think it's a really strong step change in the right direction. We've also talked around some of the concepts of net gain and the role that, or rather the hook that we have in the 25-year environment plan to really deliver net gain through sustainable drainage systems. And it was really great to hear what Angling Water are doing in terms of embracing innovation, community engagement, and delivering sustainable drainage systems as part of integrated water management. So to sign off, I think we really have 3 ways that we can make 2019 the year for sustainable drainage systems. I think we need to recognise and use the hooks in existing policy to push organisations and developers to deliver sustainable drainage systems that also deliver net gain and wider multifunctional benefits. Those hooks exist, we need to try and use them. We also need to inspire the public to understand and appreciate sustainable drainage systems in the context of wider management of the, finite water resources. And we also need to be mindful of the threat of climate change and the role that sustainable drainage systems can play in trying to mitigate some of those impacts. And I think I'll just sign off by, let's be ambitious and let's be bold. Thank you.